What's up, everybody? Sorry I've been gone for a minute. I haven't had many video ideas lately, but while I've been gone, I've been watching a ton of Hunter x Hunter. I started it and I finished it, and I have a lot of thoughts. And so I'm gonna be drawing this dope ass pose that Gon struck during the show, and just talking about my thoughts. So enjoy. What's up, guys? Alright, so full disclosure, I wrote down all my thoughts in like an essay format because I know throughout my videos I do a lot of ums and ahs, and I just want to be able to get my point across without stumbling over a million words, which you can see it happens. So I'm gonna be reading my thoughts. Hopefully it's not, hopefully it doesn't take away from the personality, but that's how it's gonna be. And big spoiler alert, I definitely talk about spoilers in this, so if you haven't seen the show, do yourself a favor and go see this show, or just turn the sound off and kick back and watch me draw. So to start off, I chose to draw this pose based on how much the moment he sat down in front of Pitou struck me. It was such a solid power move that you would never expect, and by doing that, he immediately became such a respected character in my eyes. And throughout the series, I thought Gon was a bit generic until the Chimera arc began, and then as it ended, his character completely threw me for a loop. The episode where they confront Pitou was so beautifully drawn. Like, the expressions on Gon's face throughout his entire meltdown were expressions I'd never seen from the character before. Like, to me, he got more character development in that one scene than the rest of the show, even though I feel like that would be an unfair take to make as he considerably grows throughout his adventure. And everything that followed that scene unfolded perfectly with an amazing combination of suspense, empathy, and storytelling. But my view on the show as a whole is, after seeing it, I have a whole new appreciation for character writing in general. There were so many insane ideologies going on with every character that it would be a several hour-long video covering all of them, so I just want to touch base on my favorites and how much I loved watching their journey unfold. And I'm going to start with Leorio. This man was like the one emotionally stable guy throughout the whole series that just continued being the positive voice in everyone's life. In a world so seemingly inhabited with selfishness, where most of the characters really only want to pursue their purpose through an act of revenge, greed, or power, Leorio was the guy that never really showcased any negative intentions. And this really shined during the Hunter exam in the last several episodes of the show. I just can't say enough about how important he seemed to be as like the only morally grounded character in the series. But moving on to Netero, I can't go without mentioning his incredibly twisted character arc he goes through. I don't even know if it would be referred to as an arc, or more so it's just how his true nature always was. But I think the author Togashi meant this, as it's never really a sure thing until the end of the show. He starts off as such a giving, helpful character, or that's what it seemed to be portrayed as to me, but throughout my experience watching, there would be small slip-ups that would make it seem like he was a bit more malicious than I originally thought. Like, in the Hunter exam, it almost seemed as though he was enjoying the pain being brought down on all the contestants, but I kind of brushed it off until his final fight with Meruem. Only then was it clear to me that Netero's intentions from the very start had been selfish, in that he always had been searching for that challenge that Meruem could supply. And then every previous scene made so much more sense looking at it in a different light, such as how he seemed to construct the Hunter exam to weed out the weak and put a spotlight on potential adversaries he'd have to challenge his own power. All the way to the very end, where his final sacrifice was, again, for his own selfish desires. And in extreme contrast, we have Meruem, who seemed to have a very different arc, which went from being a cold god only focused on power as brute strength to meeting Komugi, who over time progressively gives him insight on his own humanity as he grows into what seemed like the complete opposite of Netero. By the end of the fight, at least. And that entire dynamic alone could have served as a main show plot, but was just a small part of what was already a packed story full of breathing characters that all lived separate lives and had separate motives. And speaking of separate motives, let's talk about Killua, right? What started off as what essentially felt like a programmed killing machine ended up to be like the most supportive friend in all of anime, and in the saddest way. Like, to me, it always felt like Gon was 2 steps ahead of Killua, who would consistently learn from Gon's actions, whether it be the use of his Nen or just his general kindness at heart. But what intrigued me was how much he supported Gon's search for his dad. No matter how tough the path was ahead for Gon, Killua was always sure to be by his side, or at least assisting him in accomplishing the goal. And slowly, he began to learn how important friendship was as he's going through like this metamorphosis of accepting Gon as a friend, and he becomes less and less attached to his family's values and what they molded him to be. And thanks to Gon, over time he was able to break free of the mindset his family imprisoned him in. And what's funny to me is, while this is all going on, Gon doesn't even realize it because he just grew up good-natured at heart, so it's like just normal for him, you know? And he's just casually being Killua's friend, but to me it felt like their friendship meant just so much more to Killua. Moving on to the Phantom Troop, I admittedly wasn't too interested in this arc as it started, but while it unfolded, I became so taken back by how chill this group of villains was. It was like how I would have wanted the Akatsuki to interact, for instance. They were all just hanging out and playing cards, friends with each other. Each character you could tell cared about being part of the group, as opposed to just a generic team of villains like the Sinister Six or something where the main objective is just to be evil for the hell of it. The Phantom Troop actually felt like they were building towards a purpose, and each member seemed to believe in it. Like, they would work together and reprise a camaraderie over just a common goal to kill the enemy. Like, even in some shows, the villain will just kill the teammates off. So, the Phantom Troop, to me, just shined as a really well-written group of villains, and I feel like I would be doing them a disservice by not including my thoughts on them. Which leads me to say how impossible it kind of feels picking a set of favorite characters because this show is just so full of them. Like, you got Kite, you got Knuckle, who was a good-hearted trainer to Gon, and just an all-around good guy in general. And then there's the rabbit guy. I can't think of his name right now, but he started developing motives of his own outside the Chimera Ants. And this guy just at first seems like he's just fodder, right? He's just another sort of NPC villain that's added to the group, but he starts kind of looking at the bigger picture, and it all comes crashing down on him as soon as Neferpito is born, and he just like is able to understand where his place is in the world based off his like sheer fear of Pito's power. And you got Gon's dad, who as a viewer you're so interested in until you finally meet, and then you find out he kind of sucks. You got Kurapika, who just descends into the most epic revenge arc ever. The point is, going into the show, it feels like all these characters are kind of generic, but I feel like that's kind of the point, as it wants to subvert your expectations for what a normal shonen anime would make you think. It begins making you think Gon is just this good-hearted kid that has a dream to be a hunter, which usually in most normal animes it's the central goal to complete that mission that proclaims you the best, but the story really doesn't unfold that way. You're guided into this false sense of knowing Gon will be always that moral justification in any scenario, but as his story unfolds, you're taken through this wild ride of emotions until the Chimera arc hits and you're sitting there wondering if you ever really knew Gon at all as a character. Like, as soon as the confrontation between Gon and Neferpito began, the whole tone shifts. You see this madness in his eyes, the way the artists seem to render it, where they like kind of take away the pupil and it's just like this gradient yellow. It's a really great way to kind of portray how this kid's whole world is kind of crashing down on him. At any point he's gonna snap and lose it, and because Pito is in the midst of healing Komugi for Miriam's sake, she's willing to sacrifice anything to complete that task. Then Gon makes the most alpha move you could think of and just sits down and waits for her to be finished. Which is why in turn I chose to draw this pose, because it was such a great power move, and that was like the moment that Gon as a character spoke to me most. But at this point as a viewer, Gon is starting to scare you because you're used to him being this happy-go-lucky kid, but he just keeps descending deeper and deeper into this visible rage until he kind of throws away all of his hopes and dreams in one reactionary act of hatred, giving in to his inner anguish for Pito, which culminates in like the most epic moment of the series. And this couldn't have made the same impact if you hadn't grown with Gon through the past 120-ish episodes. Watching him lose fight after fight, learn of hate, power, and greed, and then to just turn around and apply it all at once, it was insane. And the rapidly aged form was a great way to portray like this show's version of a Super Saiyan. You know, I'm putting quotation marks, Super Saiyan, or like a six-path form, right? it just made sense with the foreshadowing of Bisky and how they taught you the nin system throughout the show. I don't know why his hair was so long. Maybe because his hair just kept growing as he aged during this change. I'm not sure. Maybe you could let me know in the comments, but it was a really wild choice, I thought. In conclusion, the show has shown me that it's possible to have insane amounts of characters in a story as long as they make sense, have a sense of existence, and a great dynamic relationship between interactions. It was a show that made it okay to not focus on the main character the entire time. Like, you'd fall in love with the side characters and the villains, and it would reward you for knowing them all by reappearing later in the series with an addition that actually made sense. And I'm pretty blown away by this show, and I definitely recommend anyone give it a chance if you haven't seen it already. As I'm just catching up. Like, it came out in 2011 and it's 2020 now, so I finally sat down and watched it and absolutely loved it. And well, that's my thoughts on the show. I love the ride, and I'm happy so many people suggested it to me. And I think my next colossal adventure is to see One Piece, which I'm on episode 60 now. And like, they just entered the Grand Line, so maybe I'll do this again when I finish that. But for now, until next time, take it easy, guys.